for your grace and your mercy this day. In the name that is above every name, and we all say amen. Our Father, art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. God bless you.
Let me just start off with his organ and let's read this. Yeah, we think it's communications. Yeah.
Morning, senators. We're now going to adopt the minutes from the last meeting.
Madam, and he's buried under some paper here. Madam President, I beg leave to move that the minutes of the last sitting of this honorable chamber, which was held on the 14th day of November, yesterday, be accepted by the Senate. If I may attain a second.
Morning, I rise to second.
The minutes have been made and seconded. All those in favor of the minutes as presented, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The minutes is accepted as presented. Motion for leave of absence, leave to resign. Swearing in of new senators. Messages from the Governor General. Messages from the House of Assembly.
None.
Communications by the President.
Oh.
Good morning again. As many of us are aware, the United Nations Human Rights Commission convened their 21st meeting on October 21st in Geneva, Switzerland. The prime reason for the meetings was to have discussions on the convention regarding violence against women. And that is the elimination of violence against women, commonly known as CEDAW. The Bahamas was one of the countries discussed at these meetings, and some of the topics among many were gender equality, especially in politics, where for many years the goal, as per the United Nations and the CEDAW Convention, was to have a 30% representation in Parliament of women. Unfortunately, the Bahamas have not yet achieved even 50% of that goal, because we are now only at 13%. And I think what we're going to talk about for a little bit this morning is part and parcel of where we need to go. The records, of course, that we have speak for themselves. It should be noted, however, that in previous Free National Movement administrations, we have had the first woman elected to Parliament, the appointment of the first female Governor General, first female Chief Justice, and President of the Court of Appeals, and the first Speaker of the House of Assembly. However, we still have a long way to go, such as gender equality in pay, refugee citizenship and marital citizenship for women, and the strengthening and enforcing of our laws, particularly those related to abuse against women, inclusive anyone who would like can have access to that schedule in order to see what's happening with the men. Thanks. The chair recognizes Senator Anna Faye Ferguson. Knowles.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice. Well, all of that is my name, so. I stand to endorse everything that the previous government as well as opposition have said concerning the Zonda Club. And I also stand like Senator Mitchell, because I see Marissa in the crowd, and I know how Marissa go. And she would say, well, why didn't you say something? I was going to say something anyway, but... I stand to say no to violence against women and violence against girls. I also stand to congratulate the Zonda Club for the work that they have been doing in this community throughout the years. I salute President Johnson and Davo and their executives, who is almost a name in most households in New Providence. I want you to spread your wings to the family islands. I don't want you to be too Nassau-centric. The family island needs to know about the great work that the Zonda Club is doing in Bahamaland. On that note, I thank you, I appreciate you, and welcome to the Senate.
The chair recognizes Senator Darius.
Thank you. A special good morning to the Zonda Club of Nassau, led by Presidents Kayla Darville and Mr. Toya Johnson. Nearly 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence during their lifetime, and slightly more than half of female victims of domestic violence live in households with children under 12. And so today, as you continue to champion this cause and raise your voice to fight against violence of girls and women and boys and men, we would like to salute you and encourage you to continue to work and know that it is not going unrewarded. God bless you, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, fellow senators. Good morning, Zonda Club. I just want to stand in solidarity with everything that all of the senators have to say, and in particular on behalf of the trade union movement in the country, I wish for you all to work more closely with the trade union movement, as most of the workers are female, and that is an important part of the initiative that you're doing here today. And I stand, as all of them have said, in solidarity to say no to all forms of violence against women and girls in the entire world. So I congratulate President Johnson and Darwell on this initiative, and we look forward to working more closely with you, not only here as senators, but also, as I said, on behalf of the trade union movement. Congratulations.
Thank you, Madam President. I refuse to be the only woman in these chambers not to get up and thank the Zonda Club and say how much we appreciate your work, not only for women, but the work you've done overall. I just want to say that many of us, I know that practically all the women in this chamber, have worked over the years supporting women's rights and pushing on various issues that women deal with. Violence is one of those issues that has been very difficult to deal with, in that so much of it is hidden, and many of us are afraid or ashamed to come forward and talk about it. Now that it has for a long time been an international issue, and we've signed on to conventions that address this. And I'm happy to see that we are trying on many fronts to do whatever we can to eliminate it. So I applaud you for your work, and want you to know that I fully lend my support to this initiative and many others that you have going. I wish you every success in this effort, and I know that we will all work together to eliminate violence against women and girls and all members of society, because it happens with boys as well. So thank you for your work, and I pledge my support to your efforts.
And just one final observation, if I may. I don't know who chose the color orange. I think it's probably international color. But let me say it is particularly fortuitous choice for the Bahamas, since when you make orange by combining yellow and red. So let me say, in that spirit, that we will link arms with our brothers and sisters opposite and march boldly forward to crush all forms of violence against women and girls going forward. Yes. Madam President, it was a consensus position that it is appropriate at this point for us to offer some condolences on the passing of our recently deceased clerk.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we thank the Zonta Club, but we must all move on to some other business. And thank you all very, very much. And have a safe and pleasant day today. And do everything you need. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll speak, and then he'll speak, and then everybody else will speak, whoever wants to speak. Yeah, this is the first substantive meeting of this honorable chamber since the passing of the clerk, long-serving clerk to this chamber, Ms. Christina Brown. And I think the opposition agrees and suggested, and I agree back both ways, that this is an appropriate time for us to pay tribute to her. At the time of her funeral, the government leader opposite was unavoidably away, so I know that he would deeply treasure a moment to personally mark his sense of loss at her passing. You'd all remember, colleagues, that it was the very first meeting of this Senate after the last elections, and everybody, we'd done all of the usual things, and then we'd adjourned the Senate, and suddenly we heard a thump and some rush downstairs, and we saw that the clerk had slipped down and had injured herself. And I want to thank Dr. Darville for, he was right there on the scene to personally offer her the initial assistance and stabilization, etc. She fought valiantly for more than a year and had her moments when she was up and apparently down, and then unfortunately she passed away about a month ago. And it is very sad. I've served in this place on 2 prior occasions, and I can say that she was an absolute fixture. She and Mr. Tynes would sit there, the desks were slightly differently orientated. They were facing there, and Mr. Tynes would be leaning back comfortably with his eyes closed, meditating, no doubt, on all that was being said. But Ms. Brown would be right there, our eyes alert and wide awake. Particularly when we used to debate these long debates into the evening, around budget time particularly. But Mrs. Brown never faltered, and she was how should I put it? She was an archive of memory and historical information about the Senate and what happened and what the right way to do things was. She was also, quite frankly, indispensable in her main day job, which was as a supervisor in the cabinet office. I spoke at her homegoing celebration and indicated that from all accounts that I had heard, she was indispensable. And that during the time of her illness, when she was not there, and in my experience, cabinets did not function with the high level of efficiency that we have all become accustomed to. One of the officers defended her institution, and that's fine. She could do so. That's what she saw it, but I know what I saw. I know what I did, and I know, and I had recounted at the funeral, that because there was a delay in getting some stuff gazetted that was critical, and it was critical in this whole FATF situation that we're involved in terms of the negative mutual evaluation report. And we were having difficult and delays in getting some needed matters that had been dealt with by the Parliament gazetted, so that we could get the gazetted copies and send them up to show that we were advancing in the fight against money laundering. And I personally took it upon myself, because there was a delay, and Laura Form said it's a cabinet, it just isn't going anywhere. I went down there. Personally, I went down there to inquire. And the ladies told me, oh, don't worry, Mr. Bettel. Ms. Brown's been here. She's here today. So don't worry, whatever you come for, that's straight now, that's straight. And that's the way it was. And so, from my experience, she was, as the primary supervisor, indispensable. Now, of course, over time, new systems would emerge, new persons would rise to fill the void. That is the way of nature. But the fact is, for decades, Ms. Brown was an indispensable feature in Cabinet Office and grew to be a supervisor who kept the machinery of government going, because Cabinet Office is the heart of governance. It is the place where the business of cabinet, the business of legislating, and the business of enacting those laws that have been legislated, all of these functions are concentrated in that one office down there on the first floor of the Churchill building. And the slightest error, if something sits on someone's desk, it can resonate throughout public administration. So it's a vitally important office. She played a vitally important role, and her legacy will endure in the hearts and minds of all of us who worked with her, who benefited from her wisdom and her experience and her knowledge, and who now we have to look elsewhere towards somebody else who eventually will begin to fill her shoes. I think that's all. Who's going to fill their shoes? The Raman brothers, the great Ramans brothers. Who's going to fill their shoes? We know that nature will always find someone to fill a shoe, but will they fill it as well? Will they fill it to that level? That remains to be seen. We do, though, trust and pray that Mrs. Brown has gone on to a better existence and a higher reward. And so we say to her, well done, thou faithful public servant. We hope you've gone on to that greater reward in the public service above, where I'm sure you will again prove your indispensability. So may God richly bless her, bless and support her family, and on behalf of the government and the people of the Bahamas, and on behalf of all my colleagues on this side, and part of that side, representing government senators, we wish to offer to her family our deepest and most sincere condolences. May she rest in peace.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I too would like to join the leader on the side opposite to extend my condolences to the family of the late Mrs. Brown, who I met in 2009 when I had the privilege to serve in this honorable place. During that time, I've always found her to be someone who's willing to help, to assist, a professional, a dedicated public servant, and a person who is concerned about what happens in this place, the other place, and in our country. But there's one thing that I would always remember her for, was the fact that any time there was a need to get additional information concerning issues that affected the debate, she was always willing, dedicated, and ensure that the information was received in a timely fashion. I've learned about her as a public servant by other members who serve in this honorable place, and her bipartisan approach to the way the debate was conducted and the way the business of this honorable place was conducted clearly demonstrated her love for her job and her commitment to the Bahamian people. She was a good woman, a good person, and someone who I believe served her country well. So on behalf of all of us on this side opposite, myself, other members who served in this honorable chamber on our side, I would once again like to extend my deepest condolences to her family and to join the leader once again to say that she was an excellent public servant, and all of us can learn a great deal from her service. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you very much, Madam Vice. Thank you very much. You could cut some of that long name off, just use part of it. I too want to join the leader and the good senator over there. I had a short privilege of meeting Mrs. Brown when I came in 2017 as a senator. And even though I can't speak like they could, for a certain time, I could say that she was very professional towards me. There were some things that I was looking for when I went in the cabinet, and she was able to give it to me. We built up a short friendship, and little did I guess she knew, little did I know that it was going to be short. And when she fell down just downstairs from this place, it pained my heart. I had the opportunity to visit her in hospital only once, and she seemed to have been in very high spirit. Now that she's gone, her legacy would live on, and I want to extend my condolences to her children and to her entire family, and to say that may she rest in peace and one day rise in glory. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. As the leader opposite said, I was away at the time of the funeral. So some remarks were prepared and read for me by former Senator Joseph Curry, which expressed my formal condolences at that time on the passing of Mrs. Brown. The thing that I sought to say at that time was that if you wanted to express the idea in the flesh of the quintessential public servant, then she would be one of the examples of that quintessential public servant. And I say it because this is a small country, and whether you are one side or the next, people, if you are, will make it up even if they don't know, but you're pinned on one side or the next. And the public service, though, is supposed to be that body which, notwithstanding the political changes which take place at the top, carries on the work of the public service without fear or favor. And that's what I mean by the quintessential public servant. The other thing that strikes me about death in a small place is the late Sir Lyndon Pindling once telling me when he found out that Wenzel Granger was my uncle by marriage, that you have to be careful what you say because you don't know who is connected to who in this little place. And so, as F&M as you could be, you could hear your colleagues railing against somebody who might be your first cousin. And as soon as the meeting is over, they leave the meeting and say, "Child, you don't know what they were saying about you in here." Just as easy as that. So the public servant, though, when the election takes place and there's a change in government, doesn't matter. The new people come in and that person is supposed to be just as helpful as he or she would have been to the predecessors. And I think you could say that. Clearly, the senator who spoke before me was saying that about Mrs. Brown. It's seamless. And this is my 26th year in public life. I've served through many changes of administrations. And I think the look you would describe on her face is inscrutable. You just can't tell. She just responds. If you need something, you get it. And you know, I used to say, policemen, for example, can help you in two ways if they're your bodyguards. They can wait till the person throws the rock and then arrest the fellow after the rock has left his hand, or they can stop him before the rock is thrown. In both cases, they're doing their job, but you know, one is more helpful than the next. So I think Mrs. Brown falls in the former category. She was helpful. She was quiet and efficient in the way that she carried out her responsibilities. And you probably didn't know it. Maybe Senator Bethel has a penchant for knowing the genealogy and connections of various people, so he may know it. But you know, my main general in Fox Hill, Calvin Brown, and his brother, Godfrey, was married to Mrs. Brown. And I'm sure you would never know that. I represented her. I represented her as a constituent for 5 years. I'm sure you probably didn't know that. So that's what I'm saying. Inscrutable, right down the middle, provided support for anybody who was a member of this place without fear or favor. And when you take on a job, you do your job. And it is wonderful. You know, death is not a happy thing, but it is made easier for families when they can hear people say good things about their loved ones. And certainly in this case, we say good things about her. We remember her fondly, and may she rest in peace.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to wrap and say, in response to my friend opposite, you know, Mr. Brown, Calvin pulled me over, and he was telling me, oh, you know, that's my sister-in-law, and my brother married to her, and he was very proud of her. He was very proud of that, and he certainly in his own right has given wonderful service to his community, and so I think that reflects well on everybody. And I commend all senators for the wonderful things they said here today. And we just hope that she will rest in peace and rise in glory. Thank you, Madam President.
We will continue with our agenda. We were at communications by ministers,
None.
communications by senators.
None.
Questions.
None.
Answers to questions.
None.
Presentation of petitions.
None.
Appointment of select committees.
None.
Report of committees.
None.
First reading of bills.
None.
Second reading and committal of bills.
Thank you, Madam
Chair
President.
recognizes Senator Bethel.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. I beg leave to move for the second reading and committal of the following bill. Thank you. A bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention in the Bahamas. This is a very short bill, and I trust it'll be a short but meaningful debate. What does this bill do? In short, you know what this bill does? It doesn't, yes, okay, it creates an incorporated statutory body. But in truth, what this bill says is the respect, love, and appreciation of the legislature of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for the outstanding religious, missionary, and educational efforts of the Baptist communion now for hundreds of years in this country. You know, Bob Marley says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. And if there's any institution that historically has stood in the gap to emancipate the minds of the majority of Bahamians in this country, it has been the Baptist Church in this country. Every rock, key, settlement you go, you will find the Baptist Church. And in most cases, it's the earliest and oldest church to be found. When the established church, and you can't put the Roman Catholics in this because they were an oppressed minority for more than 100 years in the country because of the old war between England and the Catholic countries after the Reformation. But the established churches, there are at least two of them, other than the Roman Catholics, you know, they too made wonderful contributions to education, etc. But the church that really lit the fire of self-consciousness, self-awareness, resistance was undoubtedly the Baptist Church, formed, the first Baptist church being formed by two runaway slaves. But that's how serious they were. That they not only they run away, they didn't hide in the bush. They set up a meeting house on a road we now call Meeting Street. And on Meeting Street, that is where the first Baptist church was seated. And so the Baptist church, from those humble and fraught and perilous beginnings, grew and expanded its influence and reach until lions of the church like H.W. Brown became spiritual advisors and counselors in the struggle for majority rule. So great has been their contribution. It is surprising to me that 45 years plus into independence, more than 50 years since the attainment of majority rule, it is only now in the 51st year after the attainment of majority rule that the Parliament of the Bahamas has seen fit to bestow its recognition and appreciation for the sterling and outstanding efforts of the Bahamas Baptist Church and the Baptist movement for all of these years to make a better Bahamas, to fortify and defend our people, to arm them, yes, with the shield of righteousness, the sword of faith,
All right now.
the helmet of salvation, and send them forward to battle. Yeah, unlike Christy, I don't have my stock memory verses. I try to remember the whole Bible as and when needed, not just one or two or three selected verses. But no, that's a joke and a lighthearted one. It's not intended to be a serious comment. But no, seriously, It is these homegrown institutions. You know, there are several Baptist churches that came later, formed by Baptist missionary societies out of England, who were then, you see, the essence of baptism, the Baptist church in the Bahamas, that's a Bahamian thing. That started here. Yeah. And even those that were fostered later by foreign missionary entities, they all came to be fully Bahamianized. They all came because a true homegrown religion is a product of the soul, the culture. Let me sound like former Prime Minister Barry Christie, the ethos. The ethos of the people. Yeah. Absolutely. But, and so what we do today here is we're putting the final touch on a long overdue recognition for the Baptist movement, that they now have the status of having the blessing, as they say in the Roman Catholic tradition, the imprimatur, that signed, sealed, and delivered by the highest legislative body saying, well done. We give you this status. We give you, they have all the things that are provided for in this bill. Trustees, they got their convention, they have their rules, they have their constitution. But now they have the status, long accorded to the Methodists, long accorded to the Roman Catholics, long accorded to the Anglicans. But finally, they were very controlling. The Methodists were extremely influential at one point in time. For a long time, they were the state religion. Yeah, people, when they think of established churches, right, Bahamians often think naturally, because of the whole issue of establishmentism and disestablishmentism of the Anglican Church and its preeminence in England, they think that the Anglican Church was the big bad church in the Bahamas. No. The big church and the influential church for nearly more than 100 years was the Methodist Church. It was the premier church of the ruling class. Yep, but I think that's a good historic vineyard. You should probably say publicly into the mic. But it's just, it shows you that's the internal church politics of the Bahamas, I'm sure. Be that as it may. So this bill gives recognition of that. And the way this, really the genesis of it was that, we launched an initiative as a result of this 2017 mutual evaluation report, where we tried to bring focus to the application of the laws, of the regulations that have been passed by the former government in terms of the regulations of non-profit organizations. And we published the list of non-compliant organizations, among which were some Baptist churches. And so the convention intervened, the Christian Council intervened, we had dialogue back and forth. And then one time, I had a discussion with Bishop William Thompson, who sort of indicated, that he felt that successive governments had really not given the Baptist Church its due in terms of recognition. And he ruminated a bit, spoke a bit about, the status that had been accorded to other major denominations by intervention of Parliament. And I said, Bishop, that's the one thing that I will certainly move expeditiously to try to have addressed, because it is a crying shame that the Baptist communion should be in that position, left to their own devices without the slightest shred of parliamentary recognition of the sterling contributions of Baptists over the last 250-odd years of our nation. And so it was in that spirit that I went to my colleagues. We had this drafted, we shared it with them, with the communion, so that we got their views, and this draft is what has resulted. And so I feel very privileged and proud to have had some little thing to do in bringing about this happy day. Essentially, all of the properties presently owned by the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Education Convention as an entity will be transferred by this act into the possession of the incorporated trustees of that Missionary and Education Convention. So they are now an incorporation, the trustees, and they will hold all property on behalf of the convention, subject to its rules, etc. And so they now take their place with other major denominations as part of the statute law of the Bahamas with a statutory status. And so with those few comments, I just express the great pride I feel today. On my mother's side of the family, on the woman's side it was Methodist, but on my mother's side, or Anglican. But on my mother's side of the family, straight Baptist. St. Mary's Baptist Church in Little Farmers Key, Exuma, has been the church where generations of my ancestors were christened, presented to the Lord, married, buried from that church. And so a big part of me, little boy, my grandmother used to drag me down to Salem Baptist Church. And these have long services for a little boy. But you drag all of the cousins down there, all of us down there, where we see Enoch Backford was the man. And it gives me great pride to move for the second reading committal of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. If you would kindly permit me as well to express my sincere condolences to the family of Ms. Christine Brown, and also my sincere condolences to the family of Ms. Anita Dorset, who was a courageous and a strong woman, a fighter indeed. Our prayers are with her family today. And it would also be remiss of me if I do not also express sincere condolences as well to the late MP and former cabinet minister, Mr. Bradley Roberts, who was a political giant and a warrior of a man. I must mention at this point, he phoned me one time after an event and he gave some political advice and business tips. And coming from across the political lines, I thought that that was remarkable. And it only shows and highlights how great of a man Bradley Roberts was. So both myself and my husband, Brian Darius, we are eternally grateful, and may all of their souls rest in peace. Today, Madam Vice President, I rise to make contribution on behalf of the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention Incorporated Bill. I am grateful to the Almighty God for this opportunity to be a part of history and the legislative process in my country. I am also grateful to the Prime Minister for his appointment and confidence in young people and young women like myself to bring our abilities to the table to lead and to also help to be impactful in government. Today is a historical moment in our nation. This bill speaks to history, it speaks to industry, and the enterprise movement of the Bahamas Baptist Church in our communities. The Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention has been a standard bearer in exhibiting the commission, the Great Commission of the Church, the ecclesia, and the called out. Here, Madam Vice President, we see how black slaves by the name of Frank Spence in 1780, Prince William in 1790, and Sharper Morris were amidst the earliest pioneers in the Baptist Missionary Society. These mighty men of courage, of valor, and vision established not just churches, but schools in New Providence, and they ventured into many of the family of islands. Noteworthy is also an English missionary by the name of Reverend Daniel Wilshire, who was the first superintendent of the Bahamas Baptist Union, a well-educated man who once served as the chairman of the Education Board in the Bahamas. Reverend James Kerr and the other indigenous leaders who gathered together and formed the union. Here we see a miraculous work of radical faith, total reliance upon God, and an unwavering commitment to self-sufficiency and unity as they carried out their work. Madam Vice President, I look at the work of the Bahamas Baptist Union that they've done over the past 100 years, and I must say that it is nothing short of visionary. And vision is the Hebrew word ayin, which transliterates the eyes and also means to spring. So we see that through the visionary eyesight of those slaves, those that were gone before us, they are now incorporating, we are being navigated from their eyesight, and we are launching from the springboard that they founded. I would also like to point out that vision is not a function of the eyes, but a capacity of the human spirit. And without vision, the Bahamas Baptists would have repeated old cycles and old patterns. So we see here today how vision was the bridge from the past to the present, and will also be the bridge to their future. Proverbs 29:19 states, and I quote, "Where there is no vision, the people perish," end quote. So we see today that the work of the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention is nothing short of visionary. I salute the national efforts made by the Bahamas Baptist Church. One, meeting the pressing humanitarian needs and strengthening churches while simultaneously building marriages, families, and communities. The establishment of Jordan Prince William School and the Bahamas Baptist Community College. This is a stellar impact in the educational arena of this country. In a time when colonial masters were encumbered with milking the land and receiving its resources, these slaves, these Christian slaves, started churches and schools to educate, to equip, and to empower our people. Ensuring kingdom principles of culture, national discipleship, and unity is preserved for generations. We see specifically how the existence of the Baptist Convention in our geographical delineation has impacted governance. We have many members in the upper and lower house who are Baptists. The Honorable Ellsworth Johnson, MP and Minister of State for Legal Affairs, and MP Reuben Raming, among many others. Many Baptists are civil servants, legislators, policemen, and are making positive contribution to the building of this great nation. Madam Vice President, the mandate of the church is to build the kingdom of God by winning souls and transitioning the lives of its citizens. This manifestation is not just only spiritual, but also has physical manifestations and benefits to those in the kingdom and outside. Therefore, I would state, the building of the kingdom of God is the building of a blessed nation to be a blessing to other nations of the world. Madam Vice President, the church is very important in the Bahama land, for we are a Christian nation. We are a Christian nation. And I would just like to underscore the message that the Baptist Church and the church at large speaks about in this nation. The first being one, compassion, loving God and loving our neighbors ourselves. Two, opportunity, to become all that God has created us to be. Three, responsibility for our soul salvation and our nation. Four, equality before God and with man. Valor, given by God's Spirit to us to confront and challenge the status quo and change the tide of underdevelopment in our country. Ambition, our endowment by God with a desire to pursue greater heights. Liberty from sin and human oppression. Unity of marriages, homes, communities, and the nation. And lastly, enterprise. Our God-given ability is being used to solve national local problems in the country. And I'm not saying that it does happen, but I would like to interject right here. And I would state, I'm not saying that it does happen, but if it does happen, I believe that it will be an insult, Madam Vice President, to the God nature, the God likeness, and the God image upon us as a Christian nation to be looking to foreigners or foreign man or woman to bring us our solution. I dare say that many in the Senate, many in the lower house, many in the houses of God, Baptists, Anglicans, Methodists, Catholics, Seventh-day Adventists, and even more outside of these houses are well qualified with witty ideas, inventions, innovation, and solutions to our problems. Let us embrace and engage them and remunerate them as we would a foreigner. We have nothing against foreign help. We appreciate them, but we want to intentionally embrace and engage our own. On this note, I'm in full support of the bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention, their power of incorporated attorneys to inquire and deal with property, the change of persons holding office, trustees not to affect the property and interests, and the power to appoint attorney. This bill highlights the work of the Baptist community, but it also underscores, like the Attorney General said, the outstanding work and effort of the church as a whole in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. May the Lord continue to bless the Bahamas Baptist Convention, all of the churches and spiritual leaders in this nation that are carrying out the Great Commission, and may the Lord continue to bless the Bahama land.
As many. The chair recognizes Jobette Colby Davis.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you, Madam Vice President. As always, I'm grateful to God and thank Him for every opportunity that I'm able to contribute in this place on behalf of the Bahamian people. More importantly, I stand to contribute to a bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention in the Bahamas. I do not plan to be before you long, Madam Vice President, but for the record, as a good and faithful Baptist, I am happy to rise in support of the Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention Bill 2018, which I understand will assist and enable the convention to access charitable tax status for churches affiliated with its memberships. Madam Vice President, the Baptist has a very, very rich history in our country, and record reflects the role this religious denomination plays in the growth and development in our country. As a brief history, the Bahamas National Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention originated in 1848 when Prince William traveled from the Carolinas to the Bahamas on a small sailing sloop, landed in the Prince George Wharf, and walked to Meeting Street, where he began to worship at the site where Bethel Baptist Church sits today. In addition, Madam Vice President, out of Bethel Baptist Church came all other Baptist churches over the hill. And now today, Bethel Baptist is known as the mother church for the Baptists in our country. Other churches in the Bahamas, like Salem and Zion Baptist, did not originate from the indigenous movement, but were organized by the Baptist missionary. Madam President, there were many leaders of this Baptist convention, such as the late Reverend A.C. Simonet, Reverend Dr. T.B. Donaldson, Reverend Dr. Enoch Beckford Sr., Reverend Dr. R.E. Cooper, Reverend Dr. A. Samuel Colbrook, Reverend Dr. Charles Smith, Reverend Dr. Charles W. Saunders, Reverend Dr. William Thompson, Reverend Dr. Anthony Carroll, all assumed high offices and served as president. And the current president of the Bahamas Baptist Convention is Reverend Dr. Lloyd Smith. Madam Vice President, all of these men served with distinction and made valuable contributions to the growth and development of the Baptist faith and witness. In addition, the Baptist is the largest religious organization in the Bahamas, and statistics shows that the Baptist continues to grow with a population of over 87,000 Baptists in a country of over 400,000. Madam Vice President, the Baptist not only preaches the Word of God, but they have been and remain to be advocates for persons in society to educate themselves. Many of the forefathers in the Baptist faith held true to the notion that in order for one to be free, then education must play a vital role in their personal life and in society. Some of the institutions organized by the Baptist Church is the Jordan Memorial Baptist School on Blue Hill Road and later Prince William Baptist School, which remains to stand in that location at present day. In addition to the above-mentioned schools, at the tertiary level, the Baptist Church started the Bahamas Baptist Community College. Madam Vice President, the objective of the Baptist Union is to extend the kingdom of God and to support education and missions across the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And it's my understanding that the union is an independent corporate body guided by godly principles, whose aim is to ensure that all participating churches become self-supporting and free from outside bodies. Madam Vice President, it's also a well-known fact that the role the Baptist Church has played and continues to play in society. It was announced as recent as May of this year that the National Baptist Convention intention to assist the government by forging a partnership to help young people who have found themselves in trouble with the law. Madam Vice President, the Baptist further intends to provide a facility whereby young persons between the ages of 16 and 21 who may have encountered issues with the law, but in the country's discretion, should be put in the care of an authority other than penal custodian care. These individuals would be housed in a special accommodations administered by the Baptist Convention. Madam Vice President, this shows the true corporate citizens the Baptist Church remains to be and how they have contributed to the social development in the communities. Therefore, Madam Vice President, knowing the vital role that the Baptist has played and continues to play in the Bahamas, from religion to education, it is only right that we as leaders in the country do what is necessary to incorporate them and assist in areas where they require government intervention. Madam President, the bill provides for the trustees of the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention to become a corporation sole. It also provides for the incorporated trustees to acquire and that the property can be vested. It is my understanding that this legislation is necessary to assist them, the Baptist Church, to continue their work in the ministry and in the lives of people. And with the passing of the new legislation, the convention will be able to access the charitable tax-free status for churches that are part of the convention. Therefore, Madam President, I stand in support of the passing of this bill as we continue to support the work of the kingdom of God through the Baptist Church.
The chair recognizes Senator Knowles.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Madam Vice, I rise to make my brief contribution to the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention Incorporated Bill 2018. As I do so, I am very cognizant of the fact that it is always through God's grace and mercy that enables me to perform in this capacity. And so I honor God in this honorable place. Madam Vice, before I venture into the meat of this most timely bill, please permit me to mention two events that I think that I deem extremely important, and to give condolences to two persons that are very near and dear to me. During last month's school's midterm break, I had the opportunity, along with my sister pastor Esther Cooper, to address and participate in the professional development workshop in the quaint Key Blackburn Exuma. It was awesome, but more than that, Madam Vice President, I want to commend Principal Smith and her staff, there's only 5 of them, for against all odds to plan and execute such a professional workshop of that magnitude. Was highly motivated, and I enjoy every minute of it, and just to look and see that there's a saying that you should bloom where you're planted. And I can say that those 4 teachers, along with their principal, are really, really blooming in Black Point Exuma with limited resources. I took note of the local community there, and I thank them for coming to the aid of the teachers in that area. While during the professional workshop, the persons from the communities, I think it was the local government workers, they were repairing the block, the school's bathroom block. And that's commendable, Madam Vice. And the hospitality from the persons in that area, especially Mrs. Esther Roll and her son Kanaz. Your comfortable home and your good food. It was a wonderful time in Black Point, and we stayed for a day or so. And so I say kudos to those teachers. Madam Vice, the name Edmund Moxie, though he is deceased, should ring out in Bahama land. Mr. Moxie was a family islander, hailed from Ragged Island, and he was the one responsible for instituting the Coconut Grove festival during the years ahead. During the years before, I'm sorry. Mr. Moxie was the representative at one point for it was then the constituency of Coconut Grove. And it was there that he cemented the cultural village somewhere off Blue Hill Road, in the neighborhood of Blue Hill Road, and with the big pond, with the inclusion of the big pond. This week, the point I'm trying to make is that this week, the community of, it's now St. Barnabas, the community, along with their Member of Parliament, Mr. Cartwright, is sponsoring a cultural show to honor the legacy and to name the park in honor of this great giant of a man, the late Mr. Edmund Moxie. Persons from all over has come under one umbrella and have this afternoon around 6 o'clock, the park will be named in honor of the late Mr. Edmund Moxie. I salute him even in death. I knew him personally, a great musician. In those days, he instituted the heel and toe polka, the waltz, and the quadrille. They were Bahamian known dances, and he was very affluent with the accordion and the piano. May his soul rest in peace. I come now to give my condolences to a very good friend, Mrs. Snyder Dawson, and a good neighbor and distant cousin, Mrs. Quinella Viola Cunningham. Both of these ladies hailed from the family island. Snyder came from Long Island, and Mrs. Cunningham came from the Barn Hill in Crooked Island. Snyder has made a name in the public service arena where she served for many years, and she's also making a name for herself as a unionist who served in the Public Service Union as secretary for many years. And recently, she was the chairman for the Price Control Commission. Snyder was a workaholic, and she would be greatly missed. Sympathy is extended to her children, especially her son Spence, and her entire family and friends. Mrs. Cunningham was 92 years old. She was the matriarch of the Barn Hill, and she's the last of that generation from Crooked Island, the land of my birth. She was a grocery store owner. She was a farmer. She was a baker, the best bread ever. And she was also the last of that musical maestro from that part of the vineyard. Staunch Baptist, both her and Snyder are staunch Baptist. They were a living example of what Bahamians, female Bahamians are. May they rest in peace. May the good work follow them. Madam Vice, I now turn my attention to the bill and to let the Senate know that many moons ago I baptized in the Baptist Church. Although a staunch Anglican, my family was divided. Well, not so much divided. Some were Baptist and some were Anglicans. And so in those days, the father took the male child with him, whatever religion it was, and the female takes the female siblings with them to church. And so my father was the Baptist chairman. And so he was the Baptist, and hence my Baptist root. My grandmother, on the other hand, who I spent a number of my years with, she was the Anglican. And so we were Baptist Anglican. It wasn't so much of a split. It was almost an accumulation of both both Baptist and Anglican. I remember as a young girl that we have service in the day, and during the night, at the Baptist, I'm sorry, and during the night we goes to the Anglican. Over the years, I've often wondered why there were so many different phases and segments of Baptist. I recalled earlier the Reverend Talmadge Sands from the Zion Baptist Convention, and later he was replaced by the Reverend Charles Smith. They both were pulpiteers. There were overseers and bishops, such as the Reverend Michael C. Simonet. He's still alive today. By the way, Reverend Charles Smith and Reverend Sands of all well known. Reverend Simonet, Michael C. Simonet, from the St. John's Native Particular Baptist Church. He was the overseer for all local Baptist church, St. Paul's Baptist in Crooked Island. And in those days, Madam Vice, the overseers visit the island regularly. Although the mail boat was pretty well slow and the mode of transportation was the horses, Baptists were diligent in their visits to the family island. Our local church, St. Paul's in Crooked Island, was under Dr. Michaels' particular ministry. And I can remember Dr. Michael visits from Inagua to Grand Bahama, because when he comes to Crooked Island, he said, well, I just came from this place, I've just come from the other place. And the Baptist ties and roots were strong in the family islands. And then I heard about the Bethel Baptist Church, which is the oldest church in the Baptist arena. And history tells us how it was started as the meeting house, etc. And I heard about the Reverend Dr. Brown and how he oversees this particular church. And later on, now and still alive, is the Reverend Timothy Stewart. He's been the pastor now for some years. How can we forget the Reverend Charles Saunders, one of the greatest Baptist preachers of all times? He pastored the Salem. And these were all Baptist churches and different conventions and under the same segment, but there was always that this is one Baptist and this is another Baptist. And so sometimes I question whether Baptist was the largest. And it is. I believe it is. The Baptist was the largest denomination in the Bahamas. But it was so different because it was under so many different types, segments of Baptist. And this bill that we are about to, that we are debating, is so timely in that it would put Baptists under one umbrella, highlighted. Otherwise, I could go on and on, highlighting the many Baptist pulpiteers that graced Bahamaland, Reverend A.S. Colebrook, and there was one time the lone female, the Reverend Dr. Lavinia Stewart, a liberated Baptist female. When she spoke with conviction. There was a time when not many females were in the Baptist arena, but the Reverend Lavinia Stewart held the mantle. Until today, there's so many female Baptist preachers, and I salute them all. In my own native Crooked Island, although not a Baptist anymore, in my home church, St. Paul's Baptist in Crooked Island, there is Pastor Barbara Gibson. She has taken the mantle from Cunningham and from my dear granduncle Wilshire Arkissen. And so Baptists has not only graced the pulpits in New Providence, they have all been scattered over the length and breadth of the Family Islands. There is no denial that Baptists has secured themselves a niche in the annals of Bahamian history. We cannot diminish the work of the Baptists in the Bahamas. Just take a look at Jordan Prince William High School, Reverend Charles Saunders Baptist High School, the Bahamas Baptist Institute, and the Bahamas Baptist Community College. The quality education that is, as I speak today, are being received at those institutions initiated by Baptists in the Bahamas. A number of other Baptist churches have their own preschools and other schools. Private school, that is. This is commendable. But if under one umbrella, it will serve a more worthy cause. This bill seeks to do just that, among other things. I am positive that the local churches in the Family Islands are rejoicing because this is an opportunity for them to be a part of this umbrella, this Baptist umbrella. And because, you know, the Family Islands are closer and more knitted together. And they need to be a part of what this bill is seeking to do for Baptists in the Bahamas. The 10 clauses of this bill seek to uplift Baptists and ensure that a seat for all Baptists is under the tent, under this big Baptist tent. Baptists, you have a godly heritage. The number of properties now, when this bill becomes law, the incorporated trustees shall have full power to acquire by law, purchase, transfer, donations, exchange, devise, bequest, grant, gifts, conveyance, and the likes. All real property tax under subsection 1 of the above shall be held for the use and for the benefit of the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Education Convention. This, my dear Baptists, throughout the length and breadth of Bahama land, is a powerful piece of legislation, and I hasten to encourage Baptists to continue to guard your godly heritage well. One word of caution, please. For God's sake, do not let all the trustees come from New Providence. Sometimes I think we are too narcissistic. There are some wise, educated Baptists spread out in the Family Islands. Capitalize on those talents in those islands. Make this body an all for one and one for all corporation soul. Finally, I congratulate and commend the leadership of the now Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention for their fortitude and for their wisdom, both past and present. And present, I speak of the Reverend Dr. Lloyd Smith and his entire executive, and by extension, the Reverend Delton Fernando. Baptists, you have come to this house for such a time as this. And so, I wish Baptists all over the Bahamas Godspeed. Do well, Baptists. Madam Vice President, I am more than pleased to support the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention Incorporated Bill 2018. And I say, long live the Baptists of the Bahamas. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator Henfield.
You're right, man. Never got it up. Good morning, Madam Vice President, honorable senators. Once again, I acknowledge from the outset, Madam Vice President, our Heavenly Father, and I give thanks for his guidance and blessings, and I also acknowledge and give thanks once again, express my gratitude to the Most Honorable Hewitt Minnis, Prime Minister, for the opportunity to speak up for a sector of our society. Madam Vice President, what the public may not hear us say, notwithstanding the fact that we say it every time we rise, is that we stand here and come here every time by the grace of God, each of us. And Madam President, what the public doesn't hear from us as individual senators about each other is that each senator in this place loves the Bahamas, and each senator in this place loves the Bahamian people. And what they don't hear from us is that each of us makes sacrifices to be here and to assist in the development of this country. And I'm always reminded every time I get up in the morning and I drive my car to the Senate, there are persons like Senator Darius, Senator Sweeting, Senator Thompson, and Madam President who have to get on a plane and fly from Grand Bahama to come to New Providence, or fly from Eleuthera to come to New Providence and assist in the development of this country. But the reality I've come to in the last year and a half is that despite the sacrifices I see the senators in this place and the members in the other place make, the reality I've come to is that people will still say, you've sacrificed nothing, you've done nothing, and you've given nothing. And I'm reminded again, Madam Vice President, that we are here each time by the grace of God to make a difference and do our part. And I would like to encourage Madam Vice President, I indicated earlier that I beg your indulgence to express my condolences and to raise some awareness for the persons that are deaf and hard of hearing in this country. So firstly, I wish to extend my condolences to the mother who lost her son in Eleuthera, and the daughter, the 10-year-old young girl that lost her brother. There's a bigger issue here. It's not simply a fire and a 5-year-old child died. I have a 5-year-old little girl, I have a 1-year-old. When they fall down, my wife says I panic. I can't imagine what it is to lose a child in a fire, or to lose a sibling in a fire. That mother has been scarred for life, and that 10-year-old sister is going to have nightmares for life. And I would encourage the public, civil society, and the church to reach out to them. They've lost everything they've had, and they've lost a loved one tragically. And also beg leave, Madam Vice President, to encourage the family of pilot Byron Ferguson, who I know up to this moment are still searching. And I met with a friend of mine, a mutual friend of Byron, yesterday, who was still in shock, and indicated to me that, the wife with a 10-month-old child is still walking up and down that beach and the beaches, not eating, and just asking people to help me look in the bushes, look over there, check that sand. And all of our hearts break. But, it is unfortunate we live in a country in a day like today where we have mega resorts, but we don't have
our own rescue helicopters in this country. We live in a country where we don't have legislation in place for crowdfunding. I would watch in other countries an incident would happen and persons are able to donate in the millions to the search and rescue of persons rather than just sit down and wait for government's response. Families are able to open up a GoFundMe page and say, if we have persons with an airplane or a boat who are willing to assist, all we need is the fuel. Volunteers are ready to go out. All we need is somebody to provide snacks, etc. We don't have those things in place. And it's the second time this year in recent times that we've had a crash. And we have a long way to go in our response to these issues in the Bahamas, Madam Vice President. So I wish to encourage the family. I can't imagine what they're going through. To Bijan, a colleague at the bar, I extend my sympathies and I wish for the best. Finally, Madam Vice President, before I move into the bill, this week is Deaf Awareness Week. And my brothers are deaf, both of my younger brothers. And I'm proud of my brothers. And I have to say publicly that I'm not proud of us as a people in the way we treat persons with disability in this country. I grew up with my brothers and persons calling them dummy, stupid, and many times, my fists rolled up to defend my brothers. My brothers have gone off to college. I always remember the middle brother who wanted to be a chef. And he attended college in Canada, George Brown University, I think it was, and then he attended the Art Institute in Fort Lauderdale. A gourmet chef. Comes back to the Bahamas 10 years ago, but could not get a job because he was deaf. My brother, as many of you may know now, you hear about the hospital bread. My brother baked the hospital bread. Anybody else that came back to the Bahamas as a gourmet chef would not have had to bake the famous hospital bread. But because he was deaf, that's all my brother could find to do. He started baking cakes at the hospital, and the hospital started selling birthday cakes. Cakes for weddings, that's my brother. But at some point, a year ago, my brother said, that's enough. In my own country, that's enough. And he's back in Canada, relocated to Canada, where he's a gourmet chef, where he's respected. And while I'm proud of my brothers, I'm embarrassed of my own country that is not receptive and responsive to our people with disabilities. My youngest brother, Madam Vice President, this Deaf Awareness Week. Growing up, every camera my father had, he had it. Every camera. He would sit down and he would stare at a plant or a sunset of the sky or something for longer than normal. And I remember looking and thinking like, okay, let's move on. But he was still staring. And he decides he wants to be a photographer. I always remember before my daughter was born in 2013, I took him to a university in Washington called Gallaudet. He found it, he said, it's a deaf university. Me not knowing any better, I said, there's no deaf university. Maybe they have a deaf lecturer. Nonetheless, I did the research, and it's a deaf university, a whole university. And we flew to Washington, and there's a Starbucks. And every restaurant we went to in Washington, D.C., everybody in the staff could sign. That's the amount of respect they had for deaf people in Washington, D.C. Every establishment, I'd start signing to my brother, what do you want to eat? And someone would stop me and say, excuse me, what are you doing? Allow me to take his order. And they signed. And just, I think about 2 weeks ago, Starbucks announced that it has opened an all-deaf Starbucks in Washington, D.C. My little brother goes off to school in Niagara, in Canada, to study photography, Madam Vice President. And in 2016, he invited the family to come to Canada for an award ceremony that he'd been nominated for. Unbeknown to us, we would fly into Toronto, take the drive down to Niagara College, sitting at the ceremony, and they announced the photographer of the year for Canada 2016 Kenville Henfield. A deaf Bahamian who attended government high school. The photographer of the year in Canada 2016. One of the judges, and when they saw that his family had come from the Bahamas, and we didn't know he was going to win, we just thought he'd be nominated, we came to support him in his nomination. They came over to meet, one of the judges said, you know, he's a professor at Niagara College. He's been teaching photography. He started the program. He was so impressed and inspired by my younger brother that he's going back to school. The professor, he had never seen in his years anyone take the pictures the way my brother did. And he said he felt there's an unfair advantage my brother had because he's deaf. His sense of sight. And he asked, will he go back to the Bahamas? And I remember looking at my brother and my mother and said, for what? I'm a Bahamian. I'm proud of the Bahamas. I would love to develop my country, but he's being called dummy, stupid. You can't talk. And people have made fun of deaf people in this country, as we all know, for years. They apply for jobs and they can't get a job. And if they are lucky enough to get a job, some minor job we push them in the corner to do, not to be seen, not to be heard. There are no benefits for these people. There's no chance of advancement for these people. And I raised this issue today in the Parliament because I want to join the President of the Center for the Deaf, the principal of the Center for the Deaf, who called this week for more respect for our deaf people and persons hard of hearing, more assistance for them. I lived it, my brothers have lived it, my parents live it, and there are so many other deaf persons. Right in the Parliament, as we all should know, there's a young man in the Parliament who's deaf, who assists us every day. Every day. What's the chance of advancement for these people? What are the benefits for these people? We have to do a better job in addressing Bahamians with disabilities, Madam Vice President. But I also was asked to share that piece today because yesterday I did 2 Senate tours with the Ministry of Education, the President of the Senate, with Anatole Rogers in 12th grade. And whenever I do the tours, I ask students to come in and sit at the table. And I ask them where they're from, the communities they're from, their families, etc. And I try to ensure that they can see themselves where we are. That they can see themselves where we are. And one of the things I've learned from last week's tour and again yesterday's 2 tours, that a lot of the young people in this country have never been to the Senate. Don't follow the Senate. Don't see themselves having anything to offer on the national scale. And at the end of those tours yesterday and the tours last week, the children come over to ask how can they assist us and get involved and learn more. And a young man yesterday, and I didn't know at the time, I said yesterday, you know, the young fellow sat to my left. He said he's the oldest in his class. And he wants to know, as one of the youngest in the Senate, am I treated differently because of my age? Because he's treated differently on campus because he's older than the other kids. For whatever reason, he's still in school at that age. And I looked at him and I walked around the table. I said, you know what? People treat you how you see and project yourself. Nobody treats me, and I said to him yesterday in the cameras rolling, nobody treats me in the Senate as if I am too young to be here. So people will treat you how you project yourself. And there's some people, like I said, who want to be the class clown. And I said, don't end your school year, this is the 12th grade, to be remembered as the class clown. And at the end, one of the parents walks up to me and says, thank you for speaking to those kids. It was very encouraging and inspiring. It felt like you were speaking to my son. He wants to be the class clown. And when he's home, he doesn't speak. All he does is draw. 3 o'clock in the morning, I get up and he's at room drawing, and I tell him, stop drawing. We're in the car, driving everywhere, and he's drawing. And the little boy stood right there, and I said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, he doesn't know. And I said to the father afterwards, you're the problem. He says, me? I said, you are the problem, not your son. Your son has shown you his passion and his interest. And you are killing that passion and you're killing that interest and telling him to stop drawing. And if you see the little boy's work, this boy is talented. as was my little brother when he was filming the camera as a little child, and you tell him, put the camera down. And now his family's to fly to Canada to witness him receiving the award as Photographer of the Year. I was looking in a magazine, and I shared it with the father yesterday. I was looking in a magazine a few months ago, and I'm just flipping through the magazine, and there was a Honda motorbike that was being released this year. And it caught my attention. I'm not into motorbikes, but it caught my attention because of the model. And I said, this is a nice motorbike Honda's coming out with. And as I look under the picture, it says photography by Will Henfield in an international magazine. I said, no way. So I snap a picture, and I WhatsApp my brother in Canada. And he casually say, you see this? Photographer named Will Henfield. He said, oh yeah, that's me. I did that about 2 months ago for Honda. I didn't even know they put it in the magazine. I'm like, this is my deaf brother from the Bahamas in an international magazine, the photographer for Honda. And then we flip, there's another magazine, and here's a picture in this magazine. At the bottom under the picture it says, photography by Will Henfield. This is the deaf Bahamian. This is Will Henfield, magazine cover. And again, as it's Deaf Week, I asked my mom to borrow from the home some of his photography. And I'm going to show, he starts off, my name is Will Henfield. I am deaf and was born and raised in Nassau, Bahamas. And he acknowledges that on his website and everything he does, he reminds people he's deaf and he's from the Bahamas. And his photography, you follow his stuff. You're talking about some of the pictures I've seen online, 800,000 followers and likes, 600,000, 700,000. And he's recognized for his talent. And I share today that we as a people and as a government must do more. And I note that when Minister Campbell spoke with the principal this week for Center for the Deaf, he had just signed off on a $23,000 generator for the Center for the Deaf. And he gave the principal and those deaf students and their families the assurance of the government that this administration will do all that is necessary to assist in getting things right for persons with disability travelers. And I thank him for that. I will turn now, Madam Vice President, to the bill at hand. And as we all know, before there was a PLPO and F&M, there was the Baptist. And the Baptist Church educated many of our people. The Baptist Church fed, sheltered, comforted many of our people before there was a PLP or an F&M. It's the largest denomination in the country. And despite all that it has done, here we are only in 2018 after what has been done by Prince William and Enoch Beckford and Reverend Charles Saunders, going back as far as the 1700s. Now the 2018 is only being done now. And it is fitting and right on this historic occasion. And I am humbled by the opportunity to stand here today to support that bill. For those of us in this place, Madam President, the public may not know, but for those of us in this place, we're familiar with persons like Deacon Sambo Scriven, Prince William. We're familiar and we know of the development period for the Baptists of 1932 to 1976 under Reverend Enoch Beckford. And for those of us who live in the Carmichael area, you'd see the Enoch Beckford Hall. We're also familiar with the consolidation period of the Baptists of 1977 to 1982 under Reverend Dr. Leopold Cox, and the Renaissance and expansion period for the Baptists under Reverend Charles Saunders since 1982. It is an honor, again, Madam Vice President, to support the bill which we now see Parliament doing something major for the Baptists who've done exceptional things for our people for centuries. And I don't know how many Bahamians know this, but back in 62, on the eve of the elections in 62, the Progressive Liberal Party would have gone to the Reverend at Bethel Baptist Church, Dr. Brown, at that time, and asked him if he could get a guest speaker for the eve of the elections. And you know who he brought? You know who came? Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. It's the Baptists. That was the Baptists. So the Baptists have done more than just religion in this country. They have been there to promote social justice in this country. They've been there to educate our people. And Madam President, Madam Vice President, it is an honor. I support the bill. May God continue to bless the Baptist Church. And I will only ask at this time to remind the church that they are the moral compass. They are still the social conscience. They still have an obligation to educate and be a source of inspiration for our people. And may God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator Dorset.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I have this backwards. Thank you. Now, Madam Vice President, I just want to take a few minutes to endorse this bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Education Convention in the Bahamas. And as was said earlier, it provides for the incorporated trustees of the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Education Convention to become a corporation sole and to acquire property. And on the surface, on its face, Madam President, it seems pretty straightforward. It is pretty straightforward. As many organizations such as this are in fact set up as corporation sole in legislation. But I think that the implication of this bill for the Baptist community in the Bahamas are far more reaching than that. And it has the potential for transforming the way Baptists do things in the country. And I must say here that I have been raised a Baptist. I attend Mount Carey Baptist Church in Fox Hill ever since I was a child. So I know a little bit, not as much as I ought to about the history of Baptists, but I know a little bit. We are a very religious country, Madam Vice President. We have many religious organizations and many, many churches. And I often wonder whether if we did a per capita count of churches, where we would stand internationally. And I think we would stand very high in terms of churches per capita. And of all of these churches and religious organizations, Baptists comprise 32%, the majority in the Bahamas, followed by Catholics and Anglicans who come in at somewhere around 20% or so. And growing up Baptist, I often, as a child, you go to church, your parents send you to church. At least I wasn't a child who would always get up and want to, on Sunday morning, I'm going to Sunday school. But you go to church, and in the Baptist church, we go from 10 o'clock, and you're there probably until 1 o'clock on a good day. Some days you were there for even longer. But my family, half of my family were Catholic. And I remember being Baptist and wondering, why is it that when they go to church, they were out in about an hour and a half, could play, and we were there for most of the day on a Sunday. And I felt at that time that maybe the Baptists needed to be a little bit more like the Catholics and the Anglicans and a little more structured, because that would enable me to get out of church earlier on Sunday. But as I matured, I began to see it a little differently. As I understood the role that religion played in our lives, and why I, of all people, needed it in my life. So I began to understand a little more that churches are different. And Baptists in this country are different from Anglicans and Catholics. Baptists are more colorful, they're more spirited. And I began to appreciate the difference in the way we worshiped and the way we organized ourselves. Now that was good in a way, but then there were still times along the way when I thought maybe we could be a little more structured and a little more uniform in the way we did things. And for those of you who go to Baptist funerals and Catholic funerals, I think you know where I'm coming from with that. But when I read the bill and started to think about its implications for Baptists, I realized that there was a lot that I didn't know about our history. Growing up in Mount Carey, at one point we had a pastor who was a wonderful historian, Reverend Dr. Philip Ramming. And he always tried to teach us a little bit about what the Baptists were about and how we came to be the way we were at that time. And I learned that there were four major groupings of Baptists. And they were identified to me as Bethel, St. John's, Zion, and Salem. And I learned through Dr. Ramming how Salem came about, because when Reverend Daniel Wilshire, we all started in Zion, and I learned that Reverend Daniel Wilshire and some of his followers were locked out of Zion at one point. And then they went on to form Salem, under which Mount Carey now stands. So we have that kind of mixed up history of splits and that kind of thing. And if you, even looking at recent history, you'll know that Baptists are not only colorful, but they get kind of passionate. So every now and then there's some little, not so little fight in some church about how the authority in a church would be handed down as one pastor moves on and another takes his place. But despite these little spats and these little rather messy sometimes transitions, we find that Baptists in this country have made many lasting and wonderful contributions. And other speakers have talked about the education and the social changes and all that, so I don't need to go into that. But I think we know that Baptists have certainly made a contribution and continue to make a contribution in this country, and they will continue well into the future. The Baptist Missionary and Education Convention is an umbrella organization in the Baptist community. And I understand that under its umbrella, there are 8 organizations listed. They are the Bahamas Baptist Association, the Bahamas Baptist Union, Bethel Baptist Association, Morning Star Baptist Association, New Way Progressive Baptist Association, St. John's Native Baptist Society, and Zion United Baptist Convention. Now, I'm familiar with some of these. I'm not familiar with all of them, but I think that among them they encompass all of the many churches, Baptist churches, that are scattered throughout the Bahamas. The Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Education Convention is described on its website as a global fellowship uniting the nation's Baptist churches, district associations, and conventions in Christian evangelism so as to fulfill the Great Commission of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ through preaching, teaching, and healing. And Madam Vice President, that is a noble objective. But we know that attached to that, as with any noble objective, there are real-world realities that organizations such as these must address in order to attain their professed goals and objectives. This act, when passed, Madam President, will give the convention the ability to acquire property, to hold property for its use and benefit, and to manage and dispose of property. And that would bring greater certainty and order to the way in which the business of Baptists through this convention is carried out, and would make it easier for the convention to fulfill its mission. However, Madam President, I am hoping that this bill would go even further and would mark the beginning of a transformation in the Baptist community that will lead to more harmonization and organization within the community, so that going forward, Baptists would work together, even though now, there's a camaraderie and there's support among all the different Baptist churches. But every now and then something flares up, and I'm hoping that with this would not only assist that community in the way they manage property, but would mark the beginning of more cohesion within the community, so that transitions would be easier, more harmonious, and that the good work that the Baptists do in this country would not be disrupted from time to time because of these kinds of uncertainties. And with that, Madam Vice President, I support this piece of legislation.
As many? The chair recognizes Senator Mitchell.
No, it's not. Thank you very much. Madam Vice President, there was a little slogan that they used to say about the Baptist churches, that the Baptists have to divide in order to multiply. Yes, you have to divide in order to multiply. Yes, right. Multiply by dividing, yeah. And I think that is a roundabout way of saying that while I was looking at the statistics just a few minutes ago, and they say that the largest Christian denomination, because the largest religion in the country is Christian, and the largest denomination is Protestant, and within the Protestants, the largest of those denominations is the Baptist, 35%. And they say the Anglicans are 15 and the Roman Catholics 14. And then there are others going down the line. But the interesting thing about our country is that if you look at the power construct in the country, and I was just doing a poll here in the Senate, almost 50% of the people in this place are Anglicans. So that when you look at the power structure of the country, I think at one point it was like 23% of the House of Assembly, the last House of Assembly, were actually Anglicans. And so the largest of the power group, largest block in the power group always seems to end up being the Anglican Church. And Bernard Nottage, God rest him, tells the story of his actually being a member of Salem Baptist Church. But his mother determined that if he was going to advance, he needed to be a member of St. Agnes. So he went to St. Agnes as a child, although he is a Baptist by birth. That's the way our social history runs in the Bahamas. And still, people think of, even though there is no state church, I mean, just with this last funeral with Bradley Roberts, people were asking how was it possible that this state service was going to be held at the Roman Catholic Church, because the state church is the Christ Church Cathedral. Of course, there is no state church, but of course, the British, when they came here, planted the Anglican Church, and they were all Anglican, and so the power structure just devolved on them. And I was saying jokingly across the floor that Anglican priests were actually paid by the government. They were on the public payroll up until 1869, thereabouts, something like that. Yeah, when the Disestablishment Resolution took place. And we all jokingly said the Methodists got together, and because they were in the ascendancy in the assembly that time, and decided enough of this. And fancy word, disestablishment, but the effect of it was the Anglican priests were no longer on the public payroll, and they had to fend for themselves. Thus we had disestablishment. And you know, the church has been, everyone said it here before me, the church has been very much involved in the social history of our country. Again, inspired by the previous speaker, I was at the Church of God for Prophecy one day, and the preacher got up and he said, you know, when I was a child, they used to call us jumpers. He says, but guess what? Everybody's jumping now. And that is so from the Roman Catholic Church through all the Protestant denominations. Try as these priests might in the established churches to stop people from clapping in church. It can't be done. I think that ship has already sailed. And Dr. Cleveland Eneas used to always tell the story of the person from the Baptist church who visited an Anglican church, and during the sermon said, "Praise the Lord." And someone turned around and said, "We don't praise the Lord in here." Anyway, that's a bit of our social history. As I understand it, though, the particular issue of mischief, and I would simply ask in the wind-up to this debate, some reassurance that these 2 points have been covered in this legislation. As I understand it, the convention has existed for 83 years as a formal body, as an unincorporated association in law, and has had a set of trustees from time to time. So that means 1935 or thereabouts, Reverend A.C. Simonette, I'm told, was the founding president of the convention. And the convention owns property vested in those trustees. Just tangentially, for example, Progressive Liberal Party is also an unincorporated association, and property is vested in its trustees. And we are now applying for a company, which will be a not-for-profit, so that our property will be vested in a body corporate as opposed to in trustees. So this is a modernizing or reforming effort to separate the liabilities of this organization from the body corporate, so that the trustees are not personally liable for any debts or suits and so on and so forth once this incorporation is done. Yes, trustees now, if trustees are, they're personally liable. Okay, so the trustees, I think the F&M is also an unincorporated association. Right. No, that's what I'm saying. So this is a reforming statute which has that effect of separating the liabilities from the persons. Okay, so that's one. All right. Corporate takes on, is liable, not the individual trustees, which is what now obtains. So that's one. Number two is that there was a problem, I'm advised, that individual churches, and you know the Baptist is made up of individual churches, would apply for duty-free concessions or charitable concessions under the law, and were denied these concessions because they were not within the remit of the law. The convention had always thought that this was a routine kind of procedure because we've talked about how churches are formed in the Baptist Church. A congregation gets together, forms themselves, and then they would apply for this status, and you want to bring an organ in, you want to bring pews in, but it was turned down because you had to pay the customs dues. Similarly with real property tax. So the question is, how do Baptist churches who are in that position get the status which would allow them to get duty-free concessions and the concessions of a charitable body? It is the hope and expectation, as I understand it, that once this is incorporated, those churches who are part of the convention will be able to apply and get the duty-free status for those concessions. And that, I'm hoping, if because that is the expectation of the convention, I'm hoping that the Attorney General is able to say and confirm that this will accomplish that fact. Because that is the mischief they think is going to be cured, I am advised by this. So is that. Thirdly, I've read the bill, and what I would also, it appears to me that the bill does, because the Attorney General said it in his presentation, that the bill does in fact vest the existing property of the convention in this body corporate. And I assume there's no stamp tax, nothing which applies. It's all vested. Right, okay. Right.
The Baptist community is still the owner.
Right.
So there's no pressure of any transfer of tax.
Right, fine. So that I hope applies. So I would only ask for assurances on those two things, really. You've confirmed, one, that the liability, that's just a matter of operation of law. The liability is on the body corporate and not on the individual trustees. Secondly, that those churches that are part of this body corporate will be able to take advantage of the concessions which are available to charitable organizations under the law. And then the third point is that all of the property which is now, and this I would mean the schools, I think, are owned by the convention, that those would now be vested in this body, and of course no transfer taxes apply to the transfers. I would only add this, that in the Foxhill constituency, which I had some association with in the near past, there are four powerful churches in the area. Four powerful churches in the area. Mount Carey, the senator is a member of Mount Carey, St. Paul's, Macedonia, and St. Mark's. St. Mark's being associated with the St. John Society, Mount Carey with Salem, St. Paul's with Bethel, and Macedonia being independent. And they have very powerful influence on the culture in Foxhill, because those are it is around those four churches that the Foxhill Day activities take place, which brings so many people into that community. And so I'd pay my respects to them as well. My final point would be to join with the concerns expressed over the missing pilot, Byron Ferguson. I know this young man very well, his wife, his family, his brothers, his father, his mother, and they all live in the Foxhill constituency. But quite apart from that, I want to join in my concern, the concerns expressed about how this accident was dealt with. It's something, you know, I said to the family, you know, when there's a homicide in this country, the police have a designated individual that's assigned to coordinate with the family what the police are doing. So they give you a telephone number and they give you a name. And they say, if there is anything you want to know about that investigation, you call that person. And that person will tell you what is happening with the investigation. Now, that does not seem to have applied in this case. Civil aviation is the body, I believe, that's responsible for the investigation. So, right, that's fine. But the issue they were talking about is, how do I get information? Right, how do I get information? And are the officials speaking with one voice? I was giving the example while you were off mic of the police. If there's a homicide, the police assign someone. They give you a name. They give you a telephone number. If you need any information, you call that person. And they tell you, today we did this, tomorrow we expect to do that. And then that's how these things should work. And it must be heart-wrenching. I mean, you know, and I'll make this wider point, which I've made to a lot of the younger people who are coming up. I just say to myself, and this is an old man's lament, the young black male in this country can't seem to get a break. I mean, you know, you find this striving young fellow. I mean, you've never met someone, a decent man, right? Raising a family, working hard, you know, and it just seems like every time you find someone of this nature, you know, they just snatched from you. I say, goodness, what are we going to do? Whether it's, you know, a homicide or an accident of some kind. So it's a heart-wrenching thing, and I know his family and all his brothers, I mean, and his wife are heartbroken over this. It's a very difficult time, and it's not a good thing to be having a public conversation about this in the press. And that's why it's all the more important for you to have just a point person who's dealing with this, because this is a really sensitive issue for people. So that's what I'd like to add with that. And I would look forward to, as I said, the response on those 3 points that I raised with regard to the law. I join with all those who say that the Baptist Church has a fine tradition of public advocacy, of fighting for human rights and civil rights in the country. And we pay respects to all of that and thank them and all their leaders for the services which they've given to our country. And we'll continue to do everything to help support their work going forward. Thank you, and we'll support the bill.
The chair recognizes Senator Bethel.
Thank you so very much, Madam President. I really would like to commend colleagues and fellow senators in this place for the outstanding quality of the debate on this issue. I think that... Okay, that's a $50 fine, Senator.
That's a good plug, man. That's a good plug for you, man.
The outstanding quality of the debate here today, and in particular I think it's almost instinctive. It's a cultural research that has underpinned it, that persons such as Senator Anna Faye Knowles, I'm jumping, could come with long lists of who did what, when, and who was on this and that, and it's a wonderful thing. And Senator Darius, similarly, we've had some excellent contributions on the other side, Senator Joe Beth, Kobe Davis, and of course, true Baptist in here, Senator Onian Dorset. Yeah, I was dragged to the Baptist church, right? And as a little boy, but you grew up and stayed through all the way through. I'd also, so let me just say that I am deeply humbled and privileged to have had some small role to play and to be here today to put the capstone on this effort and this endeavor. I think it is something that the Baptist denomination and communion has deserved for a long time, and it really, really moves my heart to see that this legislature has finally gotten around to giving them the status. Now, on the technical issues that were raised, the question of tax assistance, it's very clear that the way in which the Tariff Act is structured, it makes it clear what sort of items that are of a religious nature are free and clear of import duties, etc. So you look at church buses, pews, all these sorts of things. And yes, there has been for smaller churches, sometimes non-denominational churches, and certainly smaller Baptist churches, the problems associated with getting recognition that they are actually, this is a genuine application. And so we trust that if not that the convention would make the application, but for example, when I get marriage officer approvals placed in front of me, the way this occurs is the denomination head, and for non-denominationals, that would be the president of the Christian Council, attaches a letter saying that this person is, in my view, a fit and proper person to be made a marriage officer. Of course, they have first to have passed the test that the executive, the state sets for them. They also need to have passed through SIB clearance, meaning Security Intelligence Branch has to sign off that they are of good character. And then the third thing is the imprimatur of the head of the denomination. So in a similar fashion, I would conceive that the officials in the bureaucracy of the Ministry of Finance, and everybody knows just how bureaucratic the bureaucracy in the Ministry of Finance can be, will accept the letter under the seal of this newly incorporated entity as being sufficient evidence that the applicants for various zero-rated imports is a bona fide church and therefore entitled to that which the legislature has determined should be accorded to churches in this country. Yes, you may. Yeah.
I just want some clarity. Let's the churches aside, though, because that I understand the point you're making there. Is this body corporate able to access, as of right, this charitable status? That's
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, if your constituent elements are charitable, and they are sharing your goals, and your goals are charitable, and you are incorporated as such, then the benefit flows to the missionary convention as well. It too, for its schools and its properties, which are plainly charitable undertakings, will have all the same privileges to apply for exemptions that are accorded to, for example, Section 14 charitable companies. So when it comes to transfer taxes, purchase of land for their purposes, they receive all of the exemptions. And the same will be accorded to this convention once this is enacted. This comes to the next issue of transfer taxes, but I would point out the wording, the specific wording of Section 8 with regard to existing properties. In short, by Section 8 of the Act, any property presently owned by the convention in its unincorporated state is immediately vested in them by operation by this act. So this act affects the transfer, and there's no tax to be paid in respect of that. This is the transfer. It becomes, by operation of law, immediately vested. And so there's no need for a conveyance, any kind of document, because even though a transfer of title, let's say, between a person and a wholly owned company, there's no change in beneficial ownership. So therefore, on transfer, you don't pay ad valorem stamp duty or VAT on it. Something that is gauged, the amount of the tax, the amount of the transfer tax, gauged on the value of the property. But you still pay $10. Well, there's no document that is going to be stamped. This enactment immediately vests the incorporated trustees with all of the properties. So when they decide that if they want to sell something or whatever, dispose of it, they have the right to do so, because by this act, all property in the Bahamas, real or personal, of whatever nature or kind, which is now vested or held in any manner in trust for or for the use and benefit of the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention, shall vest and be held by the incorporated trustees. So by virtue of this section, they will, upon this bill coming into law, automatically be vested of such properties. Let me just say, I am no more aware of the details of this very tragic crash than the general public, in the sense that it is something that thus far is within the exclusive purview of the Air Accident Investigation Department of the Department of Civil Aviation. However, I would share the concern expressed. And we had a similar and almost equally distressing experience in the last crash that occurred, when apparently, you see, the great difficulty right now, particularly with anything that results in a marine landing of some sort, is that we require the Civil Aviation Department has to rely on the efforts of another agency, usually the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. So in the last crash that occurred off of Andros, as I understand it, the search was called off maybe 50 yards away or so because of inclement weather or something, or it had gone on too long and the fellows got tired. See, the difficulty is, because it's on the marine side, then an unmotivated entity, an entity that is not sensitized to that particular job, is more, it's sensitized to catching smugglers, catching human traffickers, catching poachers, defense. And so for this aspect of civil intervention into some crisis, perhaps there's a need for stronger sensitization of the Marine unit of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force to ensure that the sense of urgency that a family would feel is also shared by those who are in the immediate vicinity, and that the principle of no stone left unturned until we find this thing must pervade. Must pervade. Because this is the second time now, and I'm only going by what I heard. They saw a piece of wreckage, they say. They left the site. That it boggles the mind, if that is so. If that is so. It is unimaginable. Okay, so if I feel that way about something like this, if my colleagues opposite and here, who sit beside me, and I see Senator Henfield particularly, if we feel as a body that about a circumstance like that, how much worse that the family feel. So we have to spend some time with our colleagues, and I don't believe there's any ill will or malice or whatever, but we have to work with our Marines, we have to work with our Defense Force to get them to see that, yes, even if it's only in finding a crash site, that is as important to the defense of the well-being of the Bahamian people, defending our well-being. Because how can we prevent such things happening unless we properly investigate each and every one? How can we show our true concern for the human beings involved if we call off the search at the slightest pretext? It cannot be the situation. It cannot happen. And so I certainly, in my position, will reach out as quickly as is possible to my colleagues to see that whatever the error, whatever the procedural misstep, whatever the perfunctoriness of what may have happened in the past, that this will never, ever, ever be repeated again. Because plainly, the damage that is being done to families and to the psyche of this nation by these things it's simply unacceptable. So I join with all colleagues who express concern about it. Lastly, I just want to say, as I wrap on this, before I move the motion, that I really must commend Senator Henfield for the first part of his presentation, where he spoke so movingly about his two brothers who had their challenges of hearing. And most particularly, the fact that despite the passage of the Persons with Disability Act, I think in 2014, all of the efforts, there is still an overwhelming cultural negativity which must be fought with the same passion and vigor that all of the previous struggles for human rights and emancipation that these struggles were fought. We have to fight against the enslavement and the dehumanizing ostracism and shunning that has for too long affected persons with disability in our country. And I'm proud to say that in my ministry, we have persons who we've employed, fully blind, totally deaf, and they, those employees both work, they perform stellar and outstanding work. Nobody has to take Abby's hand and guide her around that ministry. She isn't touching up on a bunch of walls. She knows her way around. She's able to move freely. She gets her work done. And so I embrace and warmly embrace and commend you, Senator, for those interventions and comments. And I trust that it would begin to help to move the hearts and minds of our people as we try to make a better Bahamas for every resident in this country, most particularly the most vulnerable in our society. On those notes, Madam President, I beg leave to move. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
With regard to the accident again, I wonder if the Attorney General is in a position to express to the particular sentiment that it may be appropriate for them to formally call the family, someone to call the family for a formal conference to just explain to them what is going on at the civil aviation level.
It's inconceivable to me that has not been done. No, as I said, this is the first that I've heard that particularly, and so I will be reaching out and seeing what I can do to try and bring some relief on these issues. Okay, and of course, we will have to bring in or arrange for some sensitization to the Defense Force at the highest levels and down through the ranks, so that people are a little more sensitive to these things and would appreciate the urgency of it. I could say at a technical point, I worked very closely with the drafts persons and with the civil aviation persons to work on the new Air Accident Investigation Authority that we're setting up. The authority is necessary because under the CAA rules, ICA, whatever they call it, they're saying that the investigation of every accident must be totally independent. And so a sub-department of an executive agency, the Civil Aviation Authority, is tainted by being directly connected to the executive. And the essence of air traffic investigation is that the investigation must be entirely independent. So I'm well aware of that need, but in the course of it, the vital importance, it is actually critically important that whenever there is any accident affecting an aircraft, that it be promptly, efficiently, and independently investigated. And I know, I would presume that the powers in the bill that we are drawing exist in some form, and that the Civil Aviation Department as it is able to engage other government agencies to assist in the performance of its function, one of which is to locate the crash site and to locate that which remains of the aircraft and to recover any human beings. And that is an absolute mandate, certainly in the bill coming, that they will have. Even if, I don't know if they have it, because I didn't look at the old law. We were looking at what the mandates were and putting together a new bill. So certainly in the coming bill, when we pass it, they will have the right to commandeer, in essence, the Defense Force. And to tell the Defense Force when you go, how long you stay, and you don't move until you find. They will have that absolute legal authority when the new Air Accident Investigation Authority bill is brought to Parliament. But pending that, more must be done to sensitize the Defense Force and perhaps also the Marine Division of the Police to the needs that confront us. On that note, Madam President, I beg leave to move that this bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention in the Bahamas be read a second time and committed. First read a second time.
The question is that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention in the Bahamas. As many.
I second.
As many are in favor of the bill being read a second time and committed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill will be read a second.
Just to the last part again.
From where?
Yeah.
From as many.
The ayes have it. You would have heard the ayes.
The ayes have it. The bill will be read a second time and committed.
A bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention in the Bahamas.
Further second readings and committal of bills.
There are none, Madam President. I now move that if I can obtain a seconder, that the Senate do now resolve itself into a committee of the whole with Senator Jennifer Dotson Isaacs in the chair as chairman. If I may obtain a seconder.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate resolve itself into the committee of the whole with Senator Dotson in the chair? As many?
Aye.
Those against? Nay? The ayes have it. Senator Dotson will take the chair.
Committee of the Whole.
Okay, Madam President, I move that the long title of the bill be accepted.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Madam Chairman, I beg leave to move that the short title of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the short title of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. The short title of the bill is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that Clause 2 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 2 of the bill be agreed. As many as are in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 2 of the bill is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that Clause 3 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Clause 3 of the bill be agreed. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye. Yeah.
As many.
I'm making a comment
As many.
at this point. In the substantive debate, you talked about, there was an exchange about the charitable status. And I think this was the point I was seeking to make with both 1 and 2, 2 and 3. Is that I thought that an opportunity would be made to actually confer charitable status by statute on the body. Because, as you explain it, it's now still a discretion. So that's the issue which I wanted to get clear up. That because you see, because the progenitors of this bill are of the view that this resolves all of those issues. So I'm not offering an amendment. I'm just using that as an opportunity to raise the point that the expectation is that this bill delivers charitable status to this body. That's the expectation.
That certainly is, and I think that's certainly the intention. I think that if there should be some area where we may have to come back and revisit it, we'd be happy to. But I'm not aware of any specific conferral of charitable status on any of the other statutorily incorporated churches. Okay, so I think that what applies to them will apply to the convention under this bill. Okay, I'm not aware of any provision that specifically says you are a charity, although churches are always treated as such. Thank you.
Clause 3 has been moved and seconded. As many, those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Clause 3 is approved.
I always appreciate assistance. I know, but we all here to work together. We're here to work together. Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that clauses 4 through 10 of the bill be agreed.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that clauses 4 through 10 of the bill be agreed. As many?
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The clauses 4 through 10 has been agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the bill in its entirety be agreed. There's no schedule.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. As many as in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill in its entirety is agreed.
Madam Chair, I beg leave to move that the President do now take the chair. If I may attend a
Do we
second.
have a second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that Madam Vice President do now take the chair. As many are in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Madam Vice President will now take the chair.
She's vice.
Y'all know what I say?
No, the public.
The chair, Madam Vice President, I beg leave to report that the Committee of the Whole has gone through the bill and made no amendments to the bill.
Honorable Senators, the chairman of the Committee of the Whole has reported that the committee has gone through the bill having made no amendments. Third reading? Third reading. For you.
Yeah, I'm going to read third reading.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll now have the third reading of the bill.
The application. Madam President, I beg leave to move that a bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention in the Bahamas be read a third time and passed. If I may have a seconder.
Second.
From me? Okay. A bill for an act to...
Moved and seconded.
It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention in the Bahamas is be read a third time and passed. As many? As those opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is read. Should be read a third time.
A bill for an act to incorporate the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention.
Okay. Order that the bill be now passed and order that the bill be now passed and sent to and the title thereof fiscal and the title thereof declared to be a bill for an act to this one? Yes. You want the short title?
Yes, the short title.
Oh, the Bahamas Baptist Missionary and Educational Convention Incorporated Act.
None?
Resolutions?
No, first of all, any further third readings? No, you didn't. Any further third readings?
Any further third reading?
None. No.
Consideration of House amendments?
None.
Resolutions?
None.
Discharge of select committees?
None.
Notice for future meetings?
I don't know. You ain't supposed to be leaving on the third vote. On the vote for the third vote. Anyway, Madam President, I beg leave to renew all items in the name of the government on the agenda.
Similarly, I would renew all notices standing in the name of the opposition.
Adjournment.
Thank you. Madam President, I beg leave to move that the Senate, on its rising, be adjourned, sine die.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the Senate adjourns sine die. As many as are in favor.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
I have no choice.
Madam President, I do move that the Senate be now adjourned.
The Senate is adjourned.